Hi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of DEI Deathwatch, the digest show of chronicling the downfall and the doubling down of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Welcome to Monday. Hope everybody's having a good Monday so far. Before I get into the stories, who's joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon? The Alexandier. Good afternoon. Snortopoopas Cuber. Good afternoon. Advocatus Diaboli. Good afternoon. Kieverdam. Good afternoon, and thank you, Kieverdam, for providing the link to today's Give, Send, Go. Guys, at the top of the chat box, friend of the show, Lamented Guy, asked that the Give, Send, Go for his friend Chad and his family be posted for a few days. Chad and his family are being kicked out of their home by a landlord who's given them 30 days. It's less now. And if they don't get some support in the near future, they may end up homeless, which would be, well, bad. So you have the opportunity to take a look at that Give, Send, Go. If you can donate, please do so. But even if you can't, if you can share that out on social media, that would be appreciated. So thank you for that ahead of time. And thank you, Kieverdam, for providing the link. Who else is here? Anybody else? Juliet, good afternoon. Hello. Mike Savage, Blarg. Angelverse, good afternoon to you. Fun Time Bats over on the X Machine. Yes, everybody, I'm also simulcasting over on X. So if you have an X account and you see this posted over there, if you would retweet it out, I'd appreciate that. Or if you're able to chat over via X, I don't know how that works, but I assume it does work. You can do that too, and I'll find it here. Morgan King, good afternoon. Resolute Germ, hello. Miranda Stone is here. Everybody, you know about Miranda Stone, don't you? Kirsten Scholl, hello, over on the X Machine. The Mum, hello. Who else is here? Josh Hammond, good afternoon. Anybody else? The Best Remy, hello. Unfair Ophelia, hello. Simon Willikins is here. Silver, good afternoon. And Captain Fandom Nerd, good afternoon. And anybody I missed, anybody lurking, anybody in the future, good afternoon. All right, let's start off with our premiere story. This series has taken me to places and organizations I never even thought to think about before. And now we have another one. It's going to be the U.S. Naval Academy. Elfrith, which sounds like a name out of Lord of the Rings. Elfrith pushing back on Trump policies as DEI programs face cuts. As the Trump administration moves to strip diversity, equity, and inclusion policies at the U.S. Naval Academy, a freshman congresswoman is pushing for a, quote, Navy and Marine Corps that look like our country, unquote. So you want to set a, demographic quota for the Marine Corps and Navy based on population statistics in America? Okay. U.S. Representative Sarah Elfrith, a Democrat whose District 3 encompasses parts of Anne Arundel County and the Naval Academy in Annapolis, used some of her House floor time last week to highlight women and women of color, never mind those men, who graduated from the Naval Academy and represent the diversity that contributes to the U.S. Armed Forces. Why not just say women? I mean, if you're going to just sort of generalize a demographic, women and women of color. Like white women are their own species or something. Elfrith's speech was delivered Wednesday, the same day that superintendents from 3 military academies, including the Naval Academy, were on the other side of Capitol Hill being questioned by a Senate committee on DEI policies and civilian faculty numbers. Quote, this Women's History Month. Is that what this is? I guess it's over with now. I felt it was important to tell the stories of the women and women of color, because distinguish, who are an integral part of the rich history of the United States Naval Academy, unquote, Elfrith said in a statement, referring to March being recognized as Women's History Month. Well, really, no, it should be Women's History Month and Women of Color's History Month. Because that's how we should distinguish. Quote, their stories are not just the stories of the Naval Academy, but of our military and our nation. As I made clear in my remarks, this administration's unrelenting and reckless attack on diversity, you mean discrimination, and furthermore, the stories and history of persistence, diversity, and opportunity only serves to set us back, unquote. Yes, it's going to set us back by getting rid of systemically racist and sexist policies in business and government. 1964, what can I tell you? As Elfreth fights to slow the elimination of DEI in the military and its service academies, Anne Arundel County has been in the crosshairs of several other attempts by the Trump administration and the GOP. Anne Arundel County is home to more than 25,000 federal civilian workers, according to the Maryland Department of Labor. Elfreth's constituents are particularly susceptible to cuts in the federal workforce orchestrated by the Elon Musk-led Department of Government Efficiency. Elfreth introduced the Protect Our Probationary Employees Act, POPA, P-O-P-E-A, the Pope Act. All right, this month. If passed, it would allow recently fired probationary federal employees to reclaim the seniority they accrued if rehired by the government. Yeah, I guess it depends on the circumstances, maybe. Representative Andy Harris, the lone Republican in Maryland's congressional delegation, that tells you something, targeted a Trans Day of Visibility event, which I think is today, in the county, this week. He used the Trans Pride Parade as a reason why public libraries that support LGBTQ plus programming should not receive any federal taxpayer dollars. Well, since LGBTQ plus has become something more than just visibility of minorities, I would agree, especially given what's usually promoted in libraries these days. Anne Arundel County Executive Stuart Pittman opposed Harris's attack and defended the Anne Arundel County Public Library. Quote, "Events like the Trans Pride Party reflect our library system's mission to promote inclusivity and belonging," Pittman said. I thought your library system's mission was to promote reading and the sharing of knowledge. But okay. Quote, "Politicizing or threatening federal funding because a library welcomes and affirms people of all ages in our community does a disservice to the very purpose of public libraries," unquote. Who's talking about ages? And who's politicizing what again? The Trans Pride Party. LGBTQ plus initiatives. You're taking something that's for the public and you're idolizing and elevating people on the basis of their sexuality in one instance and their lifestyle choices or elsewise in another. What does this have to do with people of all ages? Except we're talking about drag queen story time or something, aren't we? When asked for their position, the White House pointed the Baltimore Sun to Trump's executive order, quote, "restoring truth and sanity to American history," unquote. The action targets funding for programs that advance, quote, "divisive narratives and improper ideology," which is kind of a dangerously ambiguous notion, honestly, but all okay, in an effort to revise programs and exhibits the Trump administration deems, quote, "inherently racist, sexist, oppressive, or otherwise irredeemably flawed," unquote. In her speech on the House floor, Elfreth said the Trump administration's, quote, "unrelenting and reckless attack," unquote, on America's history of persistence, diversity, and opportunity only serves to set the country back. You just said that earlier in the article. Are you getting paid by the word count here? She has embarked on a mission to delay the administration's efforts at both the Naval Academy and throughout Anne Arundel County. You just said that earlier. Quote, "I strongly believe that we should have a Navy and Marine Corps that look like our country, where our midshipmen receive an education that teaches the accuracy and full history of this nation, and where the stories of women and people of color aren't skipped over because they are inconvenient," unquote. Okay, you've jammed together 2 or 3 different concepts there that are not necessarily on the same playing field here. Okay, look like our country. So you want the population of the Navy and the Marine Corps on an aesthetic level to resemble our country, quote unquote. Okay, well, even if you were to say, I want our Navy to have a population demographic split exactly the same as the United States' current population demographics, that would still be illegal because that's a quota. So what do you mean, look like our country? And then, where our midshipmen receive an education that teaches the accurate and full history of this nation. Are you talking like the 1619 Project? Because that's certainly not an accurate and full history of the nation. What are you talking about? You're talking about the war on critical race theory, is what I'm assuming you're talking about, which is all racist nonsense. So why don't you say what you mean It'd be nice, wouldn't it? But I guess she is a politician. Elfrith said, quote, failing to recognize the diversity and strength of our service members will only weaken our national security and the demographic principles we strive to embody abroad. How about failing to recognize the merit of our service members rather than their demographic fit? Wouldn't that be nice? Also, welcome to anybody coming over from Latino Slant. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Make yourselves known, and I'll try to say hello. Oh, I have Polly. Polly apparently is my boo. Hey, Polly. Hi, Polly. Many, many triangles. Only 90s kids will get that joke from like blast processing. Anyway, so yes, somebody else wants to take our public and federal institutions and still run with the ball of DEI despite the orders elsewise and despite established federal law that would say otherwise. Well, we'll see how that works out for Elfrith. Still sounds like a name in Tolkien, or maybe I could see it in like George R.R. Martin or something. Elfrith. Let's see. So 13% black people. Well, I mean, if she wants the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps to look like our country, then yeah, you're going to have 60% whites, 15 or something percent Latinos, 13% blacks, 5% Asians and elsewise. Yeah, you're just going to have to. I mean, that's got to be it, right? That must be what she means. Bill S. Preston. You are no longer black or brown or yellow or red. You are now green. You are light green or dark green. Do you understand? Jarhead. There you go. That should be that should be the mentality. The lovely Sherry. Well, hello. It is the Tim Burton lovely Sherry. Because now I associate your avatar and your name with that Tim Burton version of yourself. Jim Watari. Good afternoon. Jalissa, good afternoon. Polly sent you. Well, thank you, Polly. Fletcher, hello, Fletcher. Hope you're doing well. Otho May, good afternoon. Anybody else here that I see? I hope I didn't miss anybody. If I missed you, if you're lurking, if you're in the future, good afternoon. Let's move on to our second story, which might be interesting to the Latino slant crowd, as it does deal with Hollywood after a fashion, specifically ABC and Disney. FCC chair opens investigation into Disney and ABC over DEI practices. Boy, howdy. I hope this goes somewhere. We'll see. Brendan Carr, who was picked by President Trump to chair the Federal Communications Commission, said he's ordering an investigation into the Walt Disney Company and its ABC television network over concerns they are, quote, promoting invidious forms of DEI discrimination, unquote, referring to diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. Concerns that they are? Well, it's not really a question. It's just a matter of to what degree and at what time. But we've talked about that a lot over on Midnight's Edge and elsewise. In a letter to Disney CEO Robert Iger, Carr said the FCC's Enforcement Bureau will review whether Disney or ABC have violated any FCC equal employment opportunity regulations. I hope that's true. He added that the probe will apply to both past and current policies. Okay, I cannot stress how important this is as a precedent and as an example of what needs to happen. Now, I've said it before and I will say it again. 10 years or so have passed where DEI was triumphant in corporations and academia and elsewise. And every time that an employment decision was made under a DEI policy, that is an employment decision that, as far as I'm concerned, becomes the subject of an investigation to potential civil rights violations. Because if a company with a DEI policy decided to hire this person rather than that person because of their appearance or because of their demographic fit, and any of those considerations fall under existing civil rights law, that is a potential element of a class action lawsuit or a violation all on its own. And when you think about how many employment or promotion decisions have been made by companies like Google, like Facebook, like Citibank, like Disney, and on and on and on over the last decade, count up each one of those instances as a potential violation of federal law, not let alone civil rights law. And you might have an absolute catastrophe waiting in the wings for each one of these companies. It cannot be the case I should say, I do not want it to be the case that these companies change their wording and their branding because Trump became president, and suddenly they just get off scot-free for everything they've been doing for the last decade. There has to be accountability for what has happened in the past, not what companies are saying now. So, if Brendan Carr, over the FCC, is being honest here, and he means this, and he actually enforces against past acts, good. But, again, the proof will be in the proverbial pudding. I'll believe it when I see it. Quote, numerous reports indicate that Disney leadership went all in on invidious forms of DEI discrimination a few years ago, and apparently did so in a manner that infected many aspects of your company's decisions, unquote, Carr wrote on Thursday. The inquiry comes after Disney scaled back its diversity efforts, either by dropping certain initiatives or softening language around DEI. Among the changes, Disney Plus shortened its warning about racist stereotypes on certain classic movies, like Aladdin and The Jungle Book, removing a longer message written in 2020 that also expressed the company's commitment to an inclusive community. Probably another element of George Floyd. Last month, Disney also told employees it would replace, quote, diversity and inclusion, unquote, for talent strategy as a performance factor to evaluate executive compensation. Axios reported. Yes, let's also recall how many companies have had executive compensation tied to diversity quotas. Many, many, many companies putting effectively a bounty on hiring people on the basis of what they look like in corporate America. It's hard to avoid these things as violations of federal law when it comes to quotas. I'm really, really curious to see what hoops they will jump through to try to avoid responsibility for this, or how much the government holds them to account for it. In the letter on Thursday, Carr said although he acknowledged Disney's recent efforts, he wanted to make sure they were not just surface level, adding that, quote, all discriminatory initiatives, unquote, needed to come to an end. Quote, although your company recently made some changes to how it brands certain efforts, it is not clear that the underlying policies have changed in a fundamental manner, unquote, he said. This is also true. This is also important to look into. It's the looking into the past that I'm most concerned about. Carr took issue with Disney's Reimagine Tomorrow initiative, which he accused of being a, quote, mechanism for advancing its DEI mission, unquote. The initiative's social media described itself as a platform meant to amplify, quote, stories and storytellers that inspire a more inclusive world, unquote. While some of its social media accounts remain active, the Reimagine Tomorrow website itself was taken down last month, according to archived versions in the Internet Archive. Axios first reported the website deletion. Carr also cited a 2020 memo outlining ABC's updated inclusion standards, which required at least 50% of regular and recurring characters must be drawn from, quote, underrepresented groups, unquote. The same applied for actors and writing staff, according to The Hollywood Reporter. Okay, well, fictional characters aside, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the rubber meets the road. If you set a percentile quota for hiring initiatives based on demographics like race or gender, you're sunk. Or I should say, you should be. Again, time will tell. In a statement, Disney said, quote, we are reviewing the Federal Communications Commission's letter, and we look forward to engaging with the commission to answer its questions, unquote. If the lawyers at Disney are not running around in panic mode right now, I don't know what they're there for. They should be. I hope they are. And I hope that every other company the size of Disney or larger is looking at this and going, uh-oh, because they should be. But again, it really will matter on the consequences. Whatever happens here, I don't know what's going to happen. I hope it is not a slap on the wrist. I hope it is not just some feeble fine that amounts to a rounding error on the day's balance books for these companies. There has to be something, dare I say, substantive that occurs. But of course, only time will tell. So we shall see what we see. But that's what's happening over at the wonderful world of Disney. Let's see. Dina B., happy Monday to you. FKHC 2005, and it's not the USAFA when my dad went there too. Maybe I'm missing a piece of the puzzle there. What is the USAFA? This is me not knowing all of my abbreviations. Also, Polly reminds us to smash the like button. Yes, everybody, I would appreciate it if you would, if you haven't already. A like would be appreciated, or a share out. Either way, appreciate it. Thank you, Polly. Let's see, Advocates Diaboli. I would say find them a percentage of their profits, but with movies like Snow White, they probably don't have any. Well, yeah, that's another thing, too. Snow White is a sort of a result of their DEI practices in a more sort of outward way. But but here's the thing, too. You got to wonder, especially with movies in the last couple of years, the Academy Awards required certain percentages be met in order to qualify for Best Picture, let's say. So now the Academy Awards, in those movies that have qualified for Best Picture over the last year or two, at least by extension, have made themselves suspect of engaging in potentially illegal hiring practices in order to satisfy the Academy Awards' desires for a more diverse and inclusive slate of films. There's a whole, again, so much of this stuff has been let go without any consequences for so long that after a fashion, you could be forgiven for thinking that they weren't even illegal anymore. You know, that violating Title VI and Title VII really wasn't a thing because, I mean, if you don't enforce a law, if you never have any consequences befall anybody for violating a law, is it really a law? I really hope there's a major wake-up call. I like the rhetoric coming out of the Trump administration around this. I like the FCC taking a look at these companies. Disney's a good example to start off, and especially looking at past actions. I need to see some follow-through, and there's got to be something more than a fine. You know, what is the point of having a federal law if someone just flagrantly violates it over and over and over and over again? How many people's jobs, careers, or otherwise were denied or disrailed because of these policies? Illegal policies. Well, you're too white and male, so we're not going to hire you. Or we're going to hire you because you sleep with the right kind of people. It just makes me ill. I hope there's a salve coming. But moving on, let's go into the wonderful world of colleges. Is that what we're looking at? Oh, no, sorry, pardon me. This is something else. I clicked on the wrong story, did I? No, there we go. There it is. Yes, colleges and universities in California, which is interesting because California outlawed affirmative action itself back in 1996. So, of course, nothing in colleges and universities in California would even try to simulate affirmative action by trying to get around the rules all these years. Well, let's see what the DOJ is doing. Justice Department probes 4 California universities for DEI admissions policies. But there can't be any admissions policy violations in California. They outlawed affirmative action. What could possibly be going on? The U.S. Department of Justice, U.S. Justice Department, launched an investigation into the admission policies of 4 California universities to see if any still employ diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. You guys should be looking at those colleges for what they've been doing since 1996 because I've done several streams and videos on California strategies for getting around their own regulations. Yeah. Anyway, Attorney General Pamela Bondi announced Thursday that her department's Civil Rights Division had started compliance review checks at UCLA, UC Irvine, Stanford University, University of California, Berkeley. Stanford, not Stanford. Yes, I have a semi-long history with not being happy with Stanford University. I have a whole playlist on my channel if you'd like to look up a Stanford education. She explained that her actions followed the U.S. Supreme Court's 2023 decision that stops universities and colleges from using DEI. Well, I mean, by extension, the U.S. Supreme Court outlawed affirmative action, which is sort of an element and justification for DEI, so not exactly accurate, but sort of close, in the sense that the court rejected a diversity justification for affirmative action, and consequently that kind of nukes every DEI program elsewise in businesses and organizations overseen by Title VI specifically. but also Title VII by extension. But anyway, and that she and President Donald Trump are dedicated to ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity across the country, unquote. Bondi alleged that the elite schools have, quote, prioritized racial quotas over equality of opportunity, dividing Americans and discriminating against entire groups of applicants, all in the name of DEI, unquote. It's not untrue. Quote, the Department of Justice will put an end to a shameful system in which someone's race matters more than their ability, unquote, said Acting Associate Attorney General Chad Mizell. Quote, every college and university should know that illegal discrimination in admissions will be investigated and eliminated, unquote. Well, good. Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record because I am. What about accountability for past bad acts? Especially in California where, again, affirmative action was outlawed back in 1996. Meanwhile, the University of Southern California, while not announced to be under investigation, said in a press release Thursday that it is, quote, broadening DEI into community. Broadening? You mean rebranding? No, we don't have DEI programs. We have community programs. You know, another way to say inclusion without saying inclusion. The school said that the term DEI, quote, has evolved to encompass so many interpretations as it has increasingly become embroiled in broader cultural and political disagreements. And that, quote, recent evolving federal legal guidance further reinforces that our language and actions must be both precise and unambiguous, unquote. So you're moving from DEI into community. Yeah, there's nothing ambiguous about community. No, everybody knows exactly what that means. And by the way, as far as like DEI has evolved to encompass so many interpretations, yeah, you know who evolved it to cover so many interpretations? Corporate America. The educational institutions in this country. Yeah, because it started out as what? D&I. Oh yeah, diversity and inclusion. Then it became DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Oh, but then it became JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Oh, but then it became DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Oh, but then it was DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And then bridge, and then the inclusion index, and now community, and now talent acquisition or chief global impact officer, and on and on and on. This is all your own doing. I find it odd this article did not mention the fact that California, again, not to belabor the point, outlawed affirmative action back in 1996, and that these colleges and universities have done everything under the sun to find a way around that ban, while still trying to satisfy their need for demographic quotas. You know, they reach out and they recruit from particular zip codes and certain areas on the expectation that they'll garner more of one demographic versus another to satisfy their aesthetic pleasure. But they don't really mention that there, which is odd to me. That's odd. Bill S. Preston, when California banned affirmative action in admissions, graduation rates went up. Yeah, I know, right? It's odd. Go Stanford Indians. Is that their mascot? I don't know. I know Stanford only through their words, deeds, and representatives, not through their sports. Snortopoopas, communist coincidence? I think not. It used to be the Indians. Okay, I may still be. I don't know. That's a lot of names for the same thing. I know, isn't it? They keep changing it. They keep adding letters to it. See, this is the kind of the reason I think why. By adding more letters and abstract concepts to it, they tried to dilute the impact, no pun intended, but I'll take it, of that first letter, which is where all the sins originate, because diversity just means discrimination. So by adding extra letters, somehow it makes it a broader thing and it's about more stuff when everything after that D word is fruit of the poison tree. It also, in some weird way, people who add extra letters onto that are attempting to add further expertise onto their titles. Like if I'm just a D&I executive, Well, that's not nearly as experienced and as rich of skill as someone who's a DEI executive. Oh, but I also specialize in belonging. Oh, well, I also specialize in justice. Well, I also specialize in accountability. So I can call myself a JEDEIABCQTY executive. It's almost like I earned a degree or something, having all these letters after my title without actually having to earn a degree. It really is just padding, meaning nothing, all sound and fury, etc. But moving on, speaking of name games, in Trump era, companies are rebranding DEI efforts, not giving up. Oh boy! Who's doubling down and in what way? With President Donald Trump signing an executive order to end the government's DEI programs, companies are moving away from using the politically charged acronym. Notice how it only becomes politically charged when there's finally a significant amount of resistance to it. There wasn't anything politically charged about it when it was ascendant. Only now. Despite DEI becoming such a divisive term, companies aren't necessarily ending their efforts. They're rebranding them. Some experts say organizations will be forced to be more thoughtful about their plans and do away with performative aspects of DEI. Yeah, performative aspects like only hiring people on the basis of their race or gender, or their orientation, or a combination of the three. After Google scrapped its diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, hiring aspirations in February, you mean it's potentially illegal quota system, CEO Sundar Pichai addressed the matter with his employees at a company all-hands meeting. And all their hands were, I'm sure, very well manicured. Quote, "We believe in building a representative workforce," Pichai said, according to audio obtained by CNBC. Quote, "We're a global company. We have users around the world, and we think the best way to serve them well is by having a workforce that represents that diversity and will continue to do that," unquote. So you're changing nothing. At the same time, he says, as a company, we will always have to comply with local laws. Among the most notable changes by Google thus far was with Melanie Parker, the company's chief diversity officer. As of February, her title has been changed to Vice President of Googler Engagement. Wonderful. Google's approach to DEI is emblematic of changes that companies across the U.S. are making to their DEI programs in the wake of President Donald Trump's election and initial actions in his return to the White House. Yes, because it all started with Donald Trump. These changes were not being made, say, starting in 2022, or certainly after the Supreme Court decision in 2023. DEI executives at Netflix and the Academy Awards weren't being laid off or quitting. Yeah, okay. Only now, only because of Trump. Over the past decade, Silicon Valley and other industries used DEI programs to root out bias in hiring. Carry the water for DEI here. Rooting out bias in hiring, not employing bias in hiring. Promote fairness in the workplace and advance the careers of women and people of color, demographics that have been historically overlooked. That is potentially, I have to watch my language here, potentially illegal. You're not supposed to advance the career of someone on the basis of their gender or of their race. We have laws for that. You're trying to put right what once went wrong for things that are no longer valid. You're trying to correct for a time when it was lawful to discriminate on the basis of gender and race by trying to balance the scales now using the very thinking and ideology that you say you would try to defeat. You don't fight fire with fire. But anyway, while DEI started as an umbrella acronym to even the playing field, well, actually it was D ampersand. You guys really don't know your history. For all this talk about we need to know the accurate history of this country, you don't even know the accurate history of DEI. While DEI started as an umbrella acronym to even the playing field, it's become a loaded term. Yeah, now that people see it for what it is. It wasn't a loaded term before. In 2023, the Supreme Court ruled against Harvard University's affirmative action admission policies, a decision that had implications for how corporations hire. Any corporation accepting federal funds didn't have the excuse of diversity anymore. It's true. In one of his first acts in his second term, and also understand, they mentioned 2023, and I'm glad that they do, but then why did they say it was all because of President Trump's election that this all started? In one of his first acts of his second term, President Donald Trump signed an executive order in January to end the government's DEI programs and put federal officials overseeing those initiatives on leave. The other directs, quote, all departments and agencies to take strong action to end private sector DEI discrimination, including civil compliance investigations, unquote. The administration has targeted nearly 50 companies that it's deemed to be in violation of its anti-DEI rules, Bloomberg reported in February. Hey, how about it being in violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964? It just continues to annoy me how people think that this all just started last week, effectively. Oh, well, Trump says DEI is a bad thing. Well, I guess now we have to consider DEI bad because it was totes legal before this, guys. There wasn't any question about its legality or its ethicality prior to this. No. Now, only that dang Trump ruining everything for everybody. Among the first of those targets is the Walt Disney Company. The Federal Communications Commission informed the company on Friday that it will begin an investigation into the DEI efforts at the media giant. Trump has shown he's willing to fault DEI policies for human tragedy. Following a mid-air collision between an American Airlines regional jet and a Black Hawk, well, a lot of traffic outside all of a sudden, regional jet and a Black Hawk military helicopter above Washington in January, Trump blasted the Biden administration's DEI policies for the crash without citing any evidence. Trump claimed DEI could have been to blame for the deadliest plane crash in the U.S. since 2001. Well, I'll tell you what, I've looked at the aviation industry a few times here on the channel, and whether or not that particular incident was the result of such policies, I'll tell you what, it's not an unreasonable concern. When you look at things like the International Aviation Transport Administration or Association and their 25 by 2025 initiative to just bum rush a whole bunch of people into jobs as pilots and executives in companies simply on the basis of their gender, when you have executives from those same airline companies talking about how they need to hire people based on what they look like first and foremost, there is and will be over time a diminishment in quality of hire versus aesthetic of hire. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about merit over appearance. You got to get rid of the identity politics. Who do you want flying a plane? Someone who is qualified and overqualified because of their skill? Or someone who's up there because they are, quote unquote, representing a demographic that you're taking pity on? I would say that of all the times that I've been up in a plane, I think I can count on my hand. I don't fly that often, but it's more than 5 times. I think I can count on one hand how many times I've actually ever seen the captain. I know sometimes that they're there to, wish people well as they get off the plane, but not always. And certainly for the important part of the flight, that part where I'm thousands of feet above the ground, it doesn't really matter to me who's in the cockpit as long as I know they know what they're doing. And DEI puts a big question mark on that, just as affirmative action did for people that got into college and so on. Quote, when you have the president blaming DEI for a plane crash, I think it makes sense that companies don't want to be out there no matter how they define it internally, Emerson said. Okay. Despite DEI becoming such a divisive term, it's only divisive now because people actually question it. Companies are not necessarily ending their efforts. You're not kidding. They're rebranding them. Many companies are continuing DEI work, but using different language or rolling it under less charged terminology like learning or hiring. Joel Emerson has worked since 2014 as a consultant for several hundred clients on workplace performance as well as diversity and inclusion strategies. But last year, she changed the language used to describe her digital platform, Paradigm. Whereas before, Paradigm marketed itself as helping clients, quote, harness the power of diversity and inclusion to create a culture where everyone can do their best work and thrive, unquote. The company's website now states that its solutions, quote, create an inclusive, high-performance culture where everyone can do their best work and thrive, unquote. Yeah, just remove diversity, keep inclusion, because that's the center of the whole Bridge campaign, their inclusion index. Yeah, you take off a couple of words, it's still the same thing, guys. Paradigm began using DEI in 2020, after the term proliferated in the corporate response to protests across the country in the wake of George Floyd's death. Well, I hate to tell you this, I was doing videos about DEI well before 2020. It didn't just show up because of George Floyd. Although how you connect George Floyd's death to corporate hiring initiatives still baffles me. Quote, we started using that a lot on our website so that companies searching for DEI could find us, Emerson told CNBC. Oh, and you also probably did it because all of a sudden, all these corporate executives started dedicating billions of dollars to their diversity efforts, and you, as a consultant, obviously wanted a slice of that pie. I don't blame you. Yay, capitalism. At the same time, quote, pre-election, as we were seeing a lot of the backlash, we reduced our use of the acronym because I didn't think it would be the best description of what we do, even though it was the best description of what you did for the past 4 years or 5 years. So you were using a bad description? You took out basically one word. Your mission statement or whatever is effectively the exact same as it was before, save for taking out the word diversity. Okay. Devika Breege, who does similar work through her Breege the Gap consulting firm. Oh, kudos. That's great. That's great. Detailed her efforts to distinguish her work in a newsletter sent out in February titled, quote, Tailored Career and Leadership Development Isn't DEI, unquote. Tailored career and leadership development. You mean tailored by racial demographic, gender demographic? You're tailoring it that way? It isn't DEI? Okay. For companies like Bridges, the rebranding is critical to the future of their business. Yeah, I know. This is all saving your skins at this point, isn't it? Some of Bridges' clients have slashed their DEI budgets by as much as 90% since 2023, she said at the time. 2023, well, that's before Trump became president. What was happening from fall of 2022 to 2023? I don't know. It's not just consulting firms that are rebranding DEI. Oh, no, of course not. J.P. Morgan in March announced that it will replace equity with opportunity in a rebrand of its DEI program. Yeah. You want to, shall we remind ourselves of J.P. Morgan's diversity quotas and executive compensation based on those quotas? I could. I still have their report. Walmart in November said it was shifting from DEI to saying, quote, Walmart for everyone, unquote. Well, that is decidedly safe. Among Fortune 100 companies, there was a 22% decrease in the use of terms like DEI and diversity, and a 59% increase in terms like belonging between 2023 and 2024, according to Paradigm. Yeah, belonging was the brand new, big, popular word to add. I'm surprised it was not included in any of Trump's executive language. They went with DEIA, accessibility, which I never really saw used that much. It was usually belonging. They were really into belonging, as veterans of my channel know. Emerson said 2023 marked the turning point for DEI in Silicon Valley. Yeah, because organizations that accept federal money were suddenly under the spotlight because of the Supreme Court's decision. That's when Google began getting rid of staffers who were in charge of recruiting people from underrepresented groups, CNBC reported. Oh, you mean recruiting on the basis of gender and race? Yeah. The company also let go of DEI leaders under Parker. Amazon also reorganized its DEI group in 2023 and brought global teams under one umbrella named, quote, Inclusive Experiences and Technology, unquote. IET? Okay. The company renamed the group to better represent the nature of the work, a company spokesperson told CNBC, adding that Amazon remains committed to building a diverse and inclusive company. Ah, man, like I say, some meaningful consequences have to befall these guys. As part of that overhaul, Amazon's Candy Castleberry, great name, changed her vice president title from VP of Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to VP of Inclusive Experiences and Technology, unquote. Tech's DEI rollback has accelerated in 2025. Google, which has cloud computing contracts with federal agencies, so what you mean is it's an organization that accepts federal funding, thus falling under Title VI, which says you cannot discriminate on the basis of race or sex in any of your programs or activities. Yes. Announced in February that it would retire its aspirational hiring targets, quotas, following Trump's executive orders. Google's commitments for 2025 had included increasing the number of people from underrepresented groups in leadership by 30%. Oh, so a racial quota? And more than doubling the number of black workers at non-senior levels. Racial quota. Quote, our values are enduring, but we have to comply with legal directions depending on how they evolve, Pichai told staffers at the February all-hands meeting. Good gravy, how they evolve. They've been there since 1964. How they evolve. Yeah, again, Trump shows up, suddenly everything's illegal. Quote, as a federal contractor, we have been reviewing all our programs, all our initiatives, Parker said. Quote, with regards to training, we're going to deprecate or stop or sunset a number of our training programs that are focused on DEI, unquote. A spokesperson for Google did not clarify which of the company's DEI programs have been cut. Well, I certainly hope someone actually goes there and has them account for that. Because, again, as was indicated with the Disney situation, it's one thing to say so, it's another thing to do so, and to prove it. Pichai went on to assure workers that Google would continue to support its employee resource groups. Oh, thank goodness. I don't want ERGs to go anywhere. They are the remnant evidence of a continued culture of division and segregation in these companies. So by all means, keep your ERGs going. Those are employee-led networks within the company that focus on a specific demographic or affinity groups such as women at Google and Black Googler Network, unquote. I did a video with the head of the Black Googler Network several years ago. It didn't sound any better then than it sounds like now. Those comments, however, came before the Equality Employment Opportunity Commission published guidance in March that listed ERGs as a potential violation of Trump's executive order if they are exclusionary, like on the basis of race or gender or ethnicity or something, or sexual orientation, as so many ERGs are. The only ERG I've ever seen with any consistency that's made any sense to me has been a veteran's ERG, because being a veteran at least says something about your personal merit and does not discriminate on the basis of your race or your gender or your age or anything else. It's just you've earned the right to be called a veteran. Everything else, yeah, it's all racist, sexist, or otherwise. Google's ERGs are open to all employees and do not exclude any protected groups, the company spokesperson told CNBC. Well, then why do you call it the Women at Google group? Why do you call it the Black Googler Network? If you just want a professional development network at your company, call it the Professional Development Network without attribution of a particular demographic. But anyway, quote, based on the current legal climate, we're reviewing our DEI programs and making changes where needed, the Google spokesperson said in a statement. The sensitivity of the term DEI came to the forefront earlier this month at Austin's annual South by Southwest conference. There, Google and Oracle had been slated to participate in a panel originally titled, quote, Successful Workplaces, Balancing Growth and Well-Being, unquote. Quote, attendees will leave with actionable insights to align business success with a thriving workplace culture, unquote, an early description of the panel noted. Oracle dropped out of the panel in February. That month, panel organizers informed participating companies that they were considering changing the focus of the conversation to the state of DEI in the workplace. Boy, I wish that had still happened. And I wish there was video of it. Quote, the fact that the Trump administration took such an aggressive approach to DEI just made obvious, in our view, how timely this discussion was, unquote, said panel organizer Luis Gramajo. a founder of nonprofit Sunday Afternoon Foundation, which helped organize that particular South by Southwest panel. The Google panelists dropped out in March after the panel's name was officially changed to, quote, Post-DEI Workplace, Tech Companies Managing Through Turmoil, unquote. I think I've done a TEDx or two on that same subject in the past. Quote, we went through I don't know how many prep calls. We changed the title of this 8+ times. We lost people who were afraid to be on this panel, unquote, said Chelsea Toller, one of the South by Southwest panelists, and a co-founder at Logictree, an Austin startup. Okay. Google was not informed of the change until late February, the company spokesperson told CNBC, adding that the panel's new topic was outside of the employee's role and experience. Right. Quote, we had a couple of different panelists back out because this conversation, which is so important, has become kind of nuclear at this point, which is wild, said Diana Ransom, Incorporated magazine executive editor and the panel's moderator at the event. I wonder if this event still happened. I'm still a little hazy on that, and if so, if I can find footage of it. Gramajo said he doesn't begrudge any of the panelists or companies that pulled out of the panel. Quote, they are, as we all are, navigating an incredibly complex and uncertain time where the rules are not clear, he said. The rules have been there since 1964. Every time I see someone say that or imply that this is some kind of new legal landscape or something, it drives me up the wall. How long is this article? Holy cats, this goes on forever. All right, well, I got one more article to read, and it's already up on an hour on this. So if you'd like to read this article, the link is in the description. But I'm going to stop that article there and take a momentary mental breather from reading through all of that nonsense. And Josh Hammond has gone all J. Jonah Jameson on us for some reason. Oh, because the person in the article's name was Parker. It's true. It's true. Swiftly tailored. Yeah, tailored things. Duck Dog, hello. Hope you're doing good. Let's see. Even veterans ERGs should not be a thing. Well, of all the things that I've ever heard mentioned as far as ERGs, that's the one thing that I could kind of see, like, and especially my first real job out of college, I started just before the invasion of Iraq. And I had several coworkers who either themselves or certainly family members were in the military, veterans or otherwise. And at that time, especially with as crazy as things were, there did... on reflection, because I don't think it existed back then, I could see a justification for having people who knew how to navigate the complexities of both work and the military or military benefits and things. I could kind of see that. I'm not saying it's necessary, it should be required, but of all the things, when you have an employee networking group or something that deals with circumstance, like single parents, or veterans, or I don't even know what else would be, but something where it doesn't apply to someone on the basis of their race or their gender or their ethnicity, but just something like you find yourself in a situation that you might need a little extra help or advice from people in the workplace who might have some help or two to be given to be able to still work and maintain your life at the same time. I could kind of see that. If you have to do ERGs at all, those are the circumstances under which you should have ERGs. But racial ERGs, gendered ERGs, orientation ERGs, ethnic ERGs, because you're a black person, you need special help. That's the implication from all of these ERGs. You automatically need some support system because of your skin color or of your genitals or something. Duck Dog, remember when South by Southwest was about independent media? Do I remember that? I mean, I suppose I can recall in distant memory a time where that was so, but not recently. So, yeah. Thank you, Duck Dog. Very much appreciate it. But moving on to my last article, I think this is the mystery article. Is this an article even? I don't know. Let's see. This is from the Daily Iowan. COGS webinar provides clarity around anti-DEI legislation. Teaching Beyond Fear answered student, faculty, and staff questions about what anti-DEI legislation means for Iowa's public universities. They shouldn't call it anti-DEI legislation. They should call it enforcing existing civil rights laws. But any way you can to turn anybody trying to enforce civil rights laws into some kind of villain, go ahead. Many teachers and students are uncertain about what anti-DEI laws, such as the most recent bill passed by the Iowa Senate to eliminate all forms of DEI in city and county offices, mean for those studying and working at Iowa's public universities and how universities can resist these laws. What do you call it when someone resists the law? To offer clarity and context around the recent legislation and how it impacts Iowa's public universities, the University of Iowa's Graduate Student Union, the campaign to organize graduate students, collaborated with local organizations to sponsor the Teaching Beyond Fear webinar. I wonder if I can get a copy of this webinar. The webinar featured a pre-recorded video of the three speakers, Marie Krebs, Henry Hamilton III Esquire. No, I'm not making that up. That is... Did he get stranded on a desert island after a 3-hour tour by any chance? And Cortland Cox. These all sound like comic book character names or something. Alongside the opportunity for those attending the webinar to participate in a live discussion and ask their own questions. Marie Krebs, a graduate student at UI's School of Social Work and the managing director for the Great Plains Action Society, an indigenous-led grassroots organization, was a recent target of the university when she refused to share a presentation she and a classmate had given on the experiences of students of color in the School of Social Work and Iowa's new anti-DEI legislation. Okay, while the presentation received positive feedback at the National Council of Social Work Education Conference, upon returning to the university, Krebs described being harassed by the university to submit her presentation for review, which she refused to do. Quote, "I definitely did not comply, and I encourage other folks to not comply to the best of their capacities," unquote, Krebs said. Is that incitement? Although she was nervous to stand up to the UI, describing how she felt the university was accustomed to pushing people around, Krebs expressed her gratitude to have her community behind her, including COGS and the Great Plains Action Society. Quote, "I didn't do this alone. I did this in community," unquote, Krebs said. There's that word again. Greg Wickenkamp, COGS Press and Publicity Committee Chair, who was also leading the webinar, agreed with Krebs, if you can believe it. Quote, "Absolutely, and I think that's what we're going to have to do moving forward, those of us who want to preserve diversity, equity, and inclusion, and accessibility moving forward," Wickenkamp replied. Defy the law and appointed authorities? Okay. And while many of the anti-DEI laws, such as Senate File 2435, which prohibits higher education institutions from holding DEI offices, have been passed and enforced recently, Hamilton, a civil rights activist... Pardon me? You're a what? You're a civil rights activist and you're for DEI. Were you paying attention in class? A civil rights activist and licensed attorney pointed out these laws exist in a larger context. Okay, this law was not passed in isolation, and we make a huge mistake if we look at these laws in isolation. It's still a part of this pattern that we've seen to rewrite history, to undo civil rights advantages and advances. Yes, anti-DEI, guys, it undoes civil rights advantages and advances. Or to force this view that America's success or Iowa's success is largely the product of one race or one sex. What? This pattern of laws includes House File 802, which prohibits educators from teaching concepts related to sexism and racism. Well, that's a little... If that's all that the thing says, that's a bit too ambiguous. Because if I teach about the civil rights era, then I'm going to be teaching about racism under law and in society. Yeah, this is the problem with some of these laws that they're passing that are either far too ambiguous or honestly are duplicative or unnecessary to existing civil rights laws or the First Amendment and elsewise. sometimes there's too much birthday cake, if you get me. Senate File 2385, which stripped the Iowa Civil Rights Commission of most of its authority to protect civil rights and consolidated this authority to a government-appointed director in the Office of Civil Rights. And Senate File 496, which banned books that reference LGBTQ plus topics from libraries. Do you mean LGBTQ plus topics, or do you mean like hardcore sexual situations and imagery from school libraries? They always couch this stuff in code words, and I always wonder, is that what you mean? Hamilton said the issue with many of these anti-DEI laws are unconstitutionally vague. Well, he could have a point, which has caused much confusion, especially amongst faculty and staff, on what is allowed to be spoken about and taught. Again, sometimes there's too much cure for the sickness. And if you make ambiguous laws saying you can't talk about racism in schools, well, how are you ever going to talk about the Civil War? How are you ever going to talk about the Civil Rights Movement? Doesn't make any sense. You can't talk about sexism in schools. Well, then how do you talk about, women's liberation or women getting the vote or anything like that? Okay. Like I say, I am not for DEI, but I'm also not for completely ambiguous and insane laws that restrict people from talking in a normal manner about normal things. He condemned Iowa's Board of Regents President Sherry Bates's comment that universities should do more to comply with, quote, the spirit of the laws and executive orders, not just the words on the paper, unquote, explaining, quote, we're a nation of laws, not men, unquote. Well, there's that too, right? Because just because a company, like, for example, one of the only and easily actionable elements of DEI policies in companies, let's say, would be a quota, right? If you have a explicitly stated quota for hiring, that would be something that explicitly would violate the law. However, if you instill a culture within your company to elevate people on the basis of their race or their gender or something, which isn't technically illegal if you can't show that decisions were made, I would still hope that people would abide by the spirit of what the law intends to do and encourage and enforce in our society, right? Not just skirt around it and only technically follow the law while still trying to make people unofficially wink, wink, nudge, nudge, adhere to an ideology that defies it. That's what I would hope. Hope springs eternal, but it's not always something people drink. Hamilton concluded his portion of the webinar by discussing civil disobedience and reading a selection from Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail. You're invoking Martin Luther King Jr. while encouraging people to defy laws that encourage non-discrimination. Mostly. Quote, there are two types of laws, just and unjust, Hamilton read. Quote, one has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. An unjust law is no law at all. Well, again, here's where we get into a mixed bag because some of the things mentioned do sound pretty stupid and probably shouldn't be something you try to enforce, like what you can and cannot teach about in a school in such an abstract concept as racism or sexism. So again, he's got half a point here, conceivably, which just makes it much more difficult to draw a line. So I wish the legislators in these states and everything that are so rampant on getting rid of DEI would really stop and think about the technical and possible breadth of what you're saying, because there's being against DEI and discrimination, and then there's just being silly. Cox, a civil rights veteran who at 19 joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and helped organize the 1963 March on Washington, joined the webinar as well to provide insight from someone who participated in past movements to gain and protect civil rights. So I don't understand why this person then would still defend DEI. For Cox, none of the legislation we're seeing today is new, and we're deeply connected to what took place in the 1960s. Who's saying that? Is that a quote? Okay. Quote, they are beneficiaries of what happened in the 1960s and 1970s and what people fought for, Cox said, but also now they have to protect the gains they have made. DEI does not protect the gains of civil rights. It deteriorates them. It removes them. It takes us backwards. It's insane that people say this. As Cox explained, part of this is building a strong belief system and imagining the future that students want. Guys, yeah, it's not me, guys. It's what the students. I'm only responding to what these students want. You know, these students who have had their heads stuffed with DEI and social justice nonsense for the last decade. So if that's what the kids want, obviously I have to follow through because I'm run by children. Imagining the future the students want, working towards this and understanding that it will take time. Quote, that is one of the things that young people need to learn is that, at the end of the day, it is going to take some time, and if you have a belief system, you will win, Cox said. If I have any belief system? Really? Well, so, Cthulhu coming to devour us all, I will win? That cats are messengers from the underworld? I will win? I didn't know this. Guys, if you have a belief system, doesn't matter what it is, you will win. I guess. Advocates Diabli, part of civil disobedience was going to jail for breaking the laws. It recognizes the laws exist and you are still breaking them even if you disagree with it. Yeah. So how many of the people in that story do you think are willing to face the fines and consequences of their actions for having broken the law? Duck Dog. Oh, Duck Dog's talking to Your Boy Pat. Your Boy Pat! Your Boy Pat is here! It's Your Boy Pat! DEI is judging by the color of someone's skin only when it gives them the advantage. Yeah. And it's judging someone else on the color of their skin that they do not deserve an opportunity. It's just racism, sexism, discrimination, almost always completely illegal, as already defined by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. If you accept federal funding, it's right there. If you're just a regular employer, it's right there. Title VI, Title VII. And again, I cannot be more thankful that affirmative action, as this weird quasi-philosophical loophole that everybody kept leaning on to violate the law, is now gone. It is gone. You don't even have that to lean on anymore. The diversity argument failed in front of the Supreme Court. It will fail if it ever comes to a reasonable court in the future, I hope. But again, waiting for those consequences. I like where things are going with the Trump administration. I like what the FCC is doing. I like what the DOJ is doing. I like what the EEOC is doing. As long as they keep doing it, but they have to follow through. You don't get to violate the law. And I'm not talking about these silly state laws like we saw in this article, as implied at least, where you put in very, very ambiguous language. Ranting Monkey and I talked about this a couple of years ago. I think it was either in California or somewhere, I forget, that somebody introduced a bill that said, in no uncertain terms, thou shalt not discuss diversity in the classroom. And not even as a vocabulary word? And I know that sounds silly, but that's the kind of thing you have to ask when you put things out like this. This is why legislation has to be very finely tuned, and you have to game out what possibilities there might be for violation, what counts and what doesn't. And when you have such broad and ambiguous language in these things, trying to fight the good fight against DEI, you also risk putting in laws and regulations that are abjectly ridiculous. And not only do you weaken your own case for fighting against DEI, but you give justified and reasonable ammunition to the opposition to try to take the whole thing down. This is why I wish these state legislators would take the time to think about what they're doing and also just look to established federal law. The simplicity of existing civil rights law is really all you need to go to. If you have to, if such language like that does not already exist in your state constitution, then just clone it and move on with your day. And let all the other little idiosyncrasies and ambiguities be played out in the courts as problems come about. Don't try to limit what people can say. That's going to be obviously a First Amendment question, like you can't talk about racism in the classroom. Nonsense. You can't talk about sexism in the classroom. Nonsense. Yeah. Anyway, Big Dave 1066. That the fourth thing from Germany means I will win. Oh yeah. Any belief system, guys. Any belief system. Swirly, those aren't beliefs, they're just true. Well, yeah, Cthulhu and cats being messengers from the underworld. I know. it's hard to say that to somebody and make them think that it's fact. And so I have to kind of say, well, it's my belief. Even though I know better, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. It's okay, whatever. I'll play ball a little bit just to make sure I don't have any great conflicts or anything. It's all not going to matter anyway, When the tentacles finally come for us all, I'll be proven right. That article said so, as we know. Anyway, everyone, that's what I meant to say. That's the show as it is right now. If you had comments on these stories that I missed in the course of the chat and everything, please leave them in a comment below, because I appreciate that as well. A like on the way out would also be appreciated. Also, do you know I have a Discord server? I have a Discord server. If you'd like to join the Discord server, there's a link in the chat right now to the Discord server. Just click on that link. You'll find yourself on the landing channel called Say Hello. And in addition to saying hello, you just have to say the secret word. The secret word will tell me that you actually watched the stream, are not a bot, and have thus earned the right, the privilege, the entitlement to join the Discord server. And today's secret word is Stanford. Just say, hello, Stanford, and I'll know that you watched the show. Outside of that, you can find me here Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for TED Excellence, where I'll take a look at another off-brand TED Talk for education and enlightenment, as well as the Sunday stream on Sundays, if you can believe it, at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, where I'll talk about other stories that happen throughout the week that I find interesting. The next episode of DEI Deathwatch is scheduled to happen on Friday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, so be there for that if you're curious about the next cavalcade of stories dealing with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Outside of that, I want to thank all of the Latino slanters for coming in and visiting when they had the opportunity. And thank you, Polly, as always, for sending people over from your show. Guys, go check out Latino Slant if you haven't already for entertainment news with a, if you can believe it, Latino slant. Also, Midnight's Edge in the morning. I am now a regular panelist on there Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So take a look at that as well. This morning we talked about the Snow White debacle being defeated by Chuck Dixon's A Working Man. Go take a look at that if you haven't already to keep up on all the Hollywood schnews. Elsewise, everyone, thank you for joining me. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things, even though everyone here is so well behaved. You have very, very little to do. Everyone who donated, either to myself or to the Give, Send, Go pinned to the top of the chat box, thank you guys so much for your generosity. Very much appreciated. Everyone, have a good rest of your Monday. For those of you dealing with month-end billing and stuff, you have my sympathies. I'm dealing with it myself. I hope it all goes smoothly today and tomorrow. Otherwise, everyone, hope you have a good rest of the day. Hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.